Hi, everyone. Happy Sunday. Welcome back to another book chat with me, Zahra Sethna from Collapse Life, and with my good friend Susan Harley of Courageous Conversations. We're all in new locations again. The little cold snap that we were having here in the United States is over, at least for us. So I'm back in my makeshift studio. And Susan, where are you today?
Well, I'm in the sunshine of Morocco
Oh,
and
wonderful.
hoping to do it outside so you could see some of the beautiful scenery. I'm in the Atlas Mountains,
How
but
wonderful.
technology tricked me and not able to. So you've just got a hotel room.
No problem. It's probably good. We won't make people too jealous. It's great that you're able to get away from what I think is a kind of a cold and rainy UK right now.
Very much so, yeah. So, yeah, it's made a lovely change and break.
Super. Well, for everyone who's tuning in and joining us, I hope you're having a sunny and warm Sunday as well. And good morning, afternoon, good evening to all of you. Thanks for being with us again. Um, we are looking today at a really interesting book by an author and researcher out of Sweden called Jacob Nordangård. He was most recently the guest on our Collapse Life podcast, and we pulled out one particular chapter from one of his books. He's written many books, and the one that we were looking at is called The Global Coup d'etat. Um, and he does a really masterful job of pinning together ideas and people and finance flows that all have created this network that's supporting the great transition or the great reset or the new normal or whatever it is that the powers that be have planned for us, admitting that the way things have been going recently haven't been very successful. Therefore, we need a new way of working, and they've got brilliant ideas for us, great solutions. And so, the global coup d'état is an update on some of Jacob's earlier books, and it looks at who's behind these ideas, when were they cooked up, because a lot of them have been decades in the making. What we talked about on our podcast was something called the Great Transitions Initiative, which is scenario planning for how things might go if market forces were in the lead, or how things might go if politics were in the lead, or if none of that happens and everything just kind of breaks down to what they call barbarization, and then the nice path, the pretty path that they lay out, which is of course the great transitions, and everything there sounds utopian and ideal. Susan, did you get a chance to peruse a little bit of Jacob's work?
I did. Word for it. It's a hefty book, isn't it? And he's an amazing researcher. I just wondered, just to start us off, a couple of questions to share. One was because I do think it's fascinating and it's such a timely subject because, of course, Davos was just the other week and you doing the interview with him yesterday, which was excellent, so interesting. I just wondered in our community and those who are tuning in today, how many have heard of the Great Reset or the Great Transition or whatever they're labeling it at the moment? Because it's something that I wasn't aware of a few years ago. And I think in the book, Jakob said, I think he says that it sort of really kicked in during the COVID time. That a lot of people said that that's just a dress rehearsal, that
Mhm.
they're really seeing how much they can get away with in terms of it's all about power and control. So I don't know how many people are familiar with that or whether it's new to them, because it is just like a Bond movie, isn't it? You've got villains who are sort of plotting to take over, in their dens and their secret meetings and their cabals, about their vision of the world. And, about that, and just to find out about it from a book like this is fascinating.
Mhm.
So do send your comments in, do add how much you know about it, how much it interests you.
Yeah.
I think it's so important at this time.
I love your Bond villain analogy because Klaus Schwab was so perfect. I mean, you could just picture him um, stroking a cat and cackling loudly, but he had the perfect accent and the outfits and everything, and in a way almost too perfect. And it's potentially, in my my skeptical mind, one of the reasons why they kind of moved him off to the side a little bit was because it was just becoming too obviously like a Bond villain. But what's really interesting in reading through Jacob's work is how the Great Reset, which was actually the title of a book that Klaus Schwab wrote, builds on work that came well before it for many decades, even from basically the founding of the United Nations 75, 80 years ago, and even before that. So this is not a new idea. It's just something that's come maybe to the public's attention more recently. But the idea that, and it all leads essentially to a technocratic future where mutual cooperation, where nationalism, where personal sovereignty just don't work. And therefore, we need some sort of technocratic solution where everything is decided at the top level by a few hand-picked experts, and then everyone else just falls into line because the only other option is just complete anarchy and just a breakdown of anything that we remotely think of as, society. So yeah, it will be interesting to know from our audience what their thoughts are and whether they've heard of these ideas. What we talked about on the podcast with Jacob was, as I mentioned, something called the Great Transitions Initiative, and it was originally put together in the 1990s. And as I said, they sort of laid out three different pathways. One that was called conventional worlds, one that was called barbarization, and then the Great Transitions Initiative. And what was quite funny about it is that the conventional worlds doesn't sound terribly exciting. This is what we have. And there are two pathways within conventional worlds, one which was market-led and one which was politics-led. But either way, those two pathways led us to the third option, which was barbarization. I did ask Jacob a little bit about what does that look like? What does that barbarization scenario look like? And how familiar might it feel to us today? And I think we have a clip from that interview that maybe we can showcase, and then we can come back and talk about it. So producer, I wonder if you can grab that clip for us. Just give us one sec as we cue it up. Okay.
The technology.
Yeah. Well,
that's why it all depends on technology. This is a good sign, isn't it? Will it actually ever work?
Yeah. It will, yes.
We discuss how it's done with the market forces. If business are leading the way, or policy reform, if politics is leading the way. And in that case, we come up with the conclusion, more or less, that if you follow these two, it will lead to barbarization in the end.
Talk about the barbarization path. What does that look like, and how familiar will this sound to people?
Yes, I think it's essentially what has happened the last 10 years or so, or even before, because it starts with a war on terror, and then we have a financial crisis, and then we have a refugee crisis. Mm-hmm. And every year had a new crisis, and it has just intensified. And global cooperation, it's not high on the agenda. If this continues, barbarization has two paths as well. One is a total breakdown of society and the institutions of the world, United Nations, for example, or all these international organizations, and even nation states. So it basically leads to an anarchistic, more primitive world, back to in history, and probably with a very different society, and with crime and poverty and everything. We will lose everything that we have in that scenario. But if this is about to happen, we can have the fortress world scenario, and that's something that we can see is in the works. The fortress world is political leaders and business people, and in cooperation with the international system like United Nations, they decide that they have to do something about this crisis.
Yeah. So interesting, because what he says is it's just layered crisis on crisis on crisis. Every year there's some new global emergency, and they have a solution for it. And if only these pesky humans would stop getting involved, we could have the pathway that would work and the solution that would work. But people keep getting in the way. And so that leads to another emergency and yet another emergency. And it seems as though they're just trying to break us down to a point where we give up and say, all right, you do everything you need to do for us because we can't take it anymore.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people, myself included, who think they create these emergencies and crises. COVID was totally created. The next one will be totally created, and they come up with a problem and then they have the solution. And that's what seduces us to think that they can fix things. And I think that's, one of the questions I was asking as I was looking at this book, Zahra, and I'd love to hear from you and from our audience, is what's the point of knowing all this? Knowing all this information about these Bond villains who have this vision of control, of them being in their bunkers and being able to control the resources and decide who they go to war with, who they give food to, who, resources, all of those things. How does it help us as ordinary people? That's sort of a question I had for myself, and I'd love to hear from other people what their thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a great answer to that. So definitely if others who are watching have any thoughts. To me, it helps to put together why things are happening and who as well, who benefits from this. So knowing this, I would rather know than not know, even if there's very little that I feel I can do about it. And that may just come from my kind of innate curiosity and being trained as a journalist. You ask questions and you want to have answers. And so maybe some of this just helps in knowing. I would rather know than not know. Whether it gives us tools to be able to fight back, I think it does, actually. I think that one of the things that Jacob said, and also Courtney Turner, who I spoke to a few weeks ago on our podcast, has said the same thing. Things from their point of view, when I say they, it's all of these folks who have been planning these scenarios and bringing about these crises and solutions. Things have been moving slower than they had hoped. And part of that is because we've been shining a light on things, and because there have been movements of people who are pushing back or writing books or doing podcasts exposing this, that makes things move a little bit slower. And I think that's a good thing. I think that tension and that friction is what helps us. I'm going to jump over because we do have a few comments, and I want to just acknowledge and thank everybody who is participating and sharing their thoughts. So Christine Mose says, yes, she's familiar with the Global Davos set. And after an initial deep dive into the unknowable global power structure, she spends more time focusing on personal resiliency and maintaining sovereignty at every level. And then there was another Christine tuning in on Susan's Courageous Conversations Substack, who points out that David Icke's latest book goes into great detail. I think it's called The Trap. So thank you so much, Christine's, for both of those great comments.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Sorry.
Susan. Yeah.
I don't know the David Icke book. That sounds good. I mean, there is so much out there about this, but I still think there is only a minority of people who are interested and curious enough to find out about it. And I think it empowers us. I think you're right. It gives us momentum in terms of educating ourselves and knowing what's happening, because it is just another vision. It doesn't have to be our vision. We can not just reject it, we can build alternatives to it, because it will take energy, it will take people doing it, people carrying out orders. And the more people who understand what this is about and what the end game is, and you started off, Zahra, which I thought was a really interesting point, that Jakob says in the book that this has been going on decades. Well, my husband's been reading a book which is about Cecil Rhodes and how he set up things that then became the Milner Group, was supported by the Rothschilds. And I know Jakob's done a lot of research into the Rothschilds, who seem to have fingers in every pie, financing it. And that was all about about empire and white supremacy, and some of those things still go on. And it talks about the Club of Rome and how they were involved. And a lot of people, and I think this is also part of what I see happening, think that Trump is fighting that, and he's going to clear all that sort of old empire stuff and London and finance and everything else. But there he was at Davos last week or so, being applauded, and he's just part of it. He's just a major distraction as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, distraction or a key player in enacting the entire system. It's hard to really figure, but by no means do I feel as though he's here to save us from this global system. And we wrote about it in Collapse Life that, he received a standing ovation with people holding up their cell phones to take video of him walking onto the stage at Davos. And that doesn't seem to be the kind of reaction that you would have if you think that this is the man who's here to cut off your head. Or to bring down the system that has propped up everything that you believe in. You wouldn't welcome that with a standing ovation and want to capture it on video so that you can share it with others later. So the fact that the acceptance of his being there and everything that he said, it just indicates that, again, this either is part of the plan or they're actively absorbing how he is and who he is into the plan. But it doesn't seem like he's going to be swinging in and breaking it all down. And in some ways, a lot of this, the plan is to break it all down. So, there was a headline just the past few days of Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, basically claiming that the United Nations is in a massive financial crisis and may not be able to continue. And for a lot of people, that would be, not a bad thing, because what has the United Nations really done in terms of solving these problems, in terms of being able to, if climate change is the crisis you're worried about, has the United Nations been doing enough to be able to stem that, or pandemics or war or any of the things? We still have this poly crisis happening. We have this forum supposedly where countries can come together and decry bad behavior or find solutions. And yet, we just saw what happened with the United States and Venezuela, and we didn't see the UN respond in any way to that. Or if it happened, I missed it. So there are a lot of people who are saying that antiquated system was built for another era. It no longer works, and it should be brought to its knees. Fair enough, but then what comes next? What system will replace it? And I think that Jakob's book very clearly shows us what they hope will be the system that replaces us, and it's essentially technocracy.
Yeah, and you said earlier that things haven't moved as fast as they would like. And I think there's an element of that, but things are moving so quickly. It's hard for us to keep up. And certainly with the United Nations, I had that veil lifted quite a while ago, that they're not there for our good or world peace or any of that. And that was demonstrated recently and this is the other thing that I've been hearing about the last week or so, is this new board of peace that they have for Gaza, that some people are saying that its longer term aim is to take over from the UN.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we don't know quite what that sort of means or what that plan is. We just know that's underway, and that there are various people. Even Morocco has now accepted quite a few people in the Arab world. And certainly from the UN point of view, they voted through the peace plan, Trump's peace plan, even though apparently it was very poorly written, it wasn't agreed, and it certainly wasn't agreed by the Palestinians.
Right.
So the UN is really there just to serve the masters. I don't see it being of any value to help the cause of peace at all.
No. And again, I think, breaking it all down, having it brought to its knees is potentially part of the plan. The system, Klaus Schwab wrote in his book, The Great Reset, which Jacob wrote about in the Global Coup d'etat, they very clearly say COVID revealed that the current system is not capable of dealing with global crises. There were disorganized national countermeasures. There was mixed evidence and ineffective coordination, ineffective leadership. And therefore, that just gave us a preview of what the next global crisis might look like. And if you liked how COVID was handled, then fair enough. But, we say that it wasn't handled well, and we're going to need a better system going forward, because the next crisis isn't going to be the same. And they know that there's going to be a next crisis, because, as you say, Susan, they are the ones who are bringing these crises into being in the first place. Christine Mose says that's what seizing and keeping Russian assets was for, funding European insanity. And we have another comment that says that the fire hose of crises is purposeful and necessary. There's no way to stay on top of everything. That's definitely true. That I think that Jacob really kind of points out that that's part of it. Is there's such an inundation of emergencies that people can't keep track, and they're just looking for some kind of solution, and that's where these scenarios kind of lead out to potential ways that things can play out. I asked Jacob. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I was just going to say, it's that well-known phrase, isn't it? Never waste a good crisis.
Exactly.
Always, it's like the magician's sleight of hand, isn't it? That things happen, and that we are gullible enough to believe that they're helping sort it out when they in fact created the problem. Mm-hmm. Sorry, what did you ask, Jacob?
I was just going to say that I asked him, when we were talking about the Great Transitions Initiative, I asked him, what does that third path, the Great Transition, what does that look like? What is the planned future that scenario team had in mind for us? And so I wonder if we can maybe pull up that video clip, because he explains, again, within each of the paths, the conventional worlds, the barbarization, and the great transitions, there were two potential scenarios. And he explained a little bit about what those looked like, if we can find and play that clip. What do the two scenarios under the Great Transitions path look like? What is the future that they're trying to bring forth for us?
Yes, so this is also two kind of scenarios, and one is called eco-communalism, and this is a more localized version. And this is something that would follow after a breakdown. You could have this kind of eco communities, eco societies popping up that talk about the value of life and sustainability and these things as well. But it's like it's not what they really favor. But what we really want is the new paradigm. And the new paradigm, then you will have this kind of world union taking care of everything on the planet.
Yeah. So even within the two nicer options that they're laying out, one sounds highly unlikely. Eco-communalism, I mean, it doesn't sound terrible, but pretty unlikely, very utopian. The other one is we'll have these global entities, a global court and a global economic entity, and basically these world unions that will run everything. One world government. The nightmare that has been laid out for us in sci-fi books from 100 years ago, that is the scenario that in the Great Transitions Initiative, they sort of favor. And it definitely looks as though in 2026, like some of those pieces are being put into place. And so another reason why I think, urgently everybody should go and grab Jacob's books and have a look, because it really does help understand what the ideas are that are driving some of what we're seeing in the chaotic headlines these days. And I think we had said last week, as well as we were talking about Jacob's book, that it's the kind of thing that you can grab almost like an encyclopedia. You can hop in at different points in his books, whether it's this one or the one he wrote about the Rockefellers. They're reference books, and each chapter helps to understand a piece of the larger global context. But it's even though they're very big books, you don't have to sit and read them from cover to cover, and that's why I find them very useful, because different pieces start to make sense at different stages, depending on where you're looking at what's happening right now.
Yeah, well, I think we're all trying to make sense, aren't we, of what's happening now. And history gives us that background. Jacob's books they're so well researched. And we're talking about they, but in the books, he actually names names. He's very clear about who we're talking about. And you don't have to look far in order to see who they are. And I heard that Larry Fink, who's head of BlackRock, again, the gloves are off. They're not trying to hide what they're doing. And in fact, I did look it up at one stage. And you can look up the World Economic Forum, and it will say on their website exactly what their plan is for 20. And they're very clearly stating it. And at Davos, Larry Fink was talking about countries which didn't have large immigration coming into them were going to be better suited for the future, because they would have a decreasing population through age and illness. So, we mustn't forget, and I know it's a difficult subject for a lot of people, but it's also a depopulation agenda, that they don't need so many of us anymore. They don't need us in commerce. They don't need us to fight battles or work in their factories. And in fact, they have AI, which is apparently going to take over from us. So it's not a scenario that's good for us. It's a scenario that's good for them. And therefore, the more people who are aware of this, the more people who can build resistance and enclaves of sanity in whatever way they can. I'm in Morocco, and I've been in the souk the last few days, which is just madness. It's chaotic, shocking in some ways. You have children. I saw a 4-year-old sitting in front of, on his own, sitting in front of a pile of tissues, selling them. It's but it works. But how are they going to digitalize that? I really don't know. And that's what I meant earlier about, well, perhaps the technology won't work as smoothly as they hope it will.
Yeah.
And, and that we will be spanners in the works.
Yes, absolutely. Just before I get to my next point, I just want to say that Christine, who comes from the Courageous Conversations podcast, says, "Whenever the people need a hero, we shall supply him." A quote from Albert Pike, 33 Degree Mason. And she also mentions that Patrick Wood's book, Technocracy Inc., is a great piece of work, which, yes, totally agree. Patrick Wood has done incredible work, and he's been one of the earliest voices explaining what technocracy is, where it came from, how it has advanced since its inception in the 1930s. And really, he's done amazing work. We've spoken with him a few times on Collapse Life, and he continues to just really churn out incredible stuff. His website is technocracy.news for anyone who's not yet familiar with it. There's a comment from Cull. What to watch out for is facial recognition. Israeli technology and Chinese 5G 3D maps. This is Christine Cull. Okay. Israeli technology and Chinese 5G 3D maps, the environment, DEW systems. China is the blueprint for the West. The infrastructure is in place. It's on the street furniture and then the social credit score. Yes, these are all part of the digital infrastructure that's being built around us. Really important points for us all to be watching. And many people have said that the model that's being played out in China is the model that's going to be built for all of us. Facial recognition, a really big one. I mean, there are so many different services now that require using a digital app and require proof of your liveness is the word. It's grammatically, I don't think it's the right word, but that is the word that's being used in this technology. So you have to hold up your phone in front of you and turn to this side and turn to that side and make certain facial expressions to prove that you're not an AI bot. It's all very chilling, and opting out is becoming even harder for a lot of these things. I always find it amazing that they can implement these kinds of ideas in a place as large and chaotic as India, for example, with 1 billion people. And yet they have one of the largest digital ID programs known. And it's because they administer government services and programs, social programs through this. So they've just given people no option. If you want to get the service, you need to have the phone app, so to speak.
Yeah, I was surprised by that, but I think they feel if they can do it in India, they can do it anywhere. And it was also India that overnight got rid of certain denominations of currency, so that, again, people who transacted in cash or had cash stashed somewhere couldn't exchange it for money, so lost money.
Mm-hmm.
That is the sort of another concern, isn't it? When it's all joined up, it
Absolutely.
won't be about facial recognition. It'll be linked to your bank account, your social credit score, your health records, and all of those things. Yeah, it's a very sort of all-encompassing digital prison that we will be held in. And of course, we will also be subjected to this whole scam about carbon and carbon credits. So we won't be allowed to travel, or we won't be allowed to heat our homes, or won't be eating the right diet, so we won't get the right score in order to, yeah. I mean, all of these things are part of it. And I just don't think we are too creative. I cannot see us acquiescing to a system like this.
Yeah.
Just not going to happen. It isn't going to happen.
I want to get to that because that is one of the things that Jacob and I talked about, and in spite of a very chilling conversation where he laid out some really grim realities, we did end on a slightly hopeful note, which we'll get to in a second. But I just want to again shout out to some of our viewers. Patricia, she said, "Thank you for inviting me to join. The evil is beyond anything imaginable, but I have to leave." So thank you, Patricia, for joining us, and we hope that you'll be back for a future book chat with us. These topics are not going away, and we cannot handle them in one 45 to 60-minute conversation. So please join us again, and thank you. And then shout out to Greg Tanetti joining us from Spain. He says, and correct him or me if we're wrong. He said, "I think the book Susan mentioned that her husband is reading may be Tragedy and Hope 101 by Joseph Plummer, which is a synopsis of Carol Quigley's book, Tragedy and Hope." Maybe.
I don't think it is that book, but it is all about Carol Quigley and his research. And that's fascinating. Again, that's another part of it, isn't it? That's why Jacob is so courageous in what he's doing, because as I understand it, Carol Quigley was a very renowned, highly thought of historian until he started investigating about the Milner Group and what they were doing and who was in it and the Rothschilds. And then he was totally discredited and his whole life came into threat. It's like so many people. And
yeah, such a familiar playbook in that way. Yeah. Wow. So this week we've had some incredible suggestions of future books that we can read and discuss on Book Chat. So thank you everyone for all those great suggestions.
Yeah, really appreciated, because this is another aspect, isn't it? They're flooding us with information, and we're in overwhelm, and there's so many people who are just switching off. They're just saying they're not watching the news, they're not taking an interest, they're getting on with their lives. And I totally understand that, and I support that if your nervous system just can't handle what's going on. And I also say, I really encourage people to look at this, to learn about it, because we can't turn away at this time. It's so pivotal. We still have time left. You know, the fact that we're talking about it today as this is what will happen, it hasn't happened yet. And we have to keep talking to each other and being creative and being courageous, don't we?
Absolutely. And just going back to your earlier point, you know, knowing these things is not, the goal is not to know so that you feel overwhelmed or depressed or helpless. The goal is to know so that you can arm yourself, so that you can figure out what your own personal resilience plan is and where you will draw lines in the sand ethically. And then to help others as well. When you're equipped with that knowledge, you can help others who haven't yet seen how all these things are lining up and maybe haven't asked the questions of themselves. So I think it is really important. And, you know, the information overload is part of the plan. They want people to feel overwhelmed. They want people to not know what's true or not know where to turn to look for truth, and therefore just become passive, become helpless, and sort of say, all right, I just can't take it anymore. I'm just going to do whatever I'm told because it's easier that way. And a large proportion of the population will probably feel that way. And those of us who don't feel that way maybe can help them see what they're losing by taking that path, and what we still have to hold on to in terms of our humanity. The conversation with Jacob ended on, as I mentioned, a somewhat hopeful note. And Courtney Turner, who's also another great researcher and a great mind on the issue of technocracy, she also echoed the idea that all is not lost, that these plans have been a long time in the making. They're planned out by people who have potentially very greedy outlooks on life, and if I put it in the nicest possible terms. But the hope is that it's far too complex to ever succeed. it requires a kind of obedience that humans just are not wired for. And you can't to have a global system that's coordinated in such a way that it works across the board, even if algorithms are fueling it. We all know, and Susan, you just mentioned this, technology doesn't always do what we want it to do, and humans have to intervene to set the course. It's just too complicated and too heavy a system to ever really work. It's never worked in the past, even on smaller scales. So to bring it up to the level of the global community, it's unlikely to succeed. And I think that's where we win. Our chaotic nature as humans, our inability to be able to communicate with each other and to get along with each other and in a perfect way, the fact that we all think differently is what's going to insulate us and save us ultimately, if all goes well. That was kind of the nice, hopeful coda to the end of the conversation with Jacob.
And it is a hopeful one. And I think none of this is wasted, because one of the things that we do know, and we do agree with them about, is that the old systems don't work. They are not suitable. They've always been corrupt. They've always been hierarchical and based on violence, and that we need new ways. And the fact that we are talking about these things, as we sort of say every week, is one, people aren't alone. There are lots of us out there who are sort of really questioning about the systems that we want to have in place. And not just that people are actually demonstrating, aren't they? I mean, people are out in the streets of mutual aid, lots of working to protect, to give food, to give money, to help people. The majority of people in the world want peace. They want things to work well and smoothly, and not to have this terrible chaos and violence and uncertainty that we have at the moment. Mm-hmm. And I think that is increasing, and more people are, I'm reticent to say waking up, but are tuning in and recognizing. And I'm going back to Christine. I think it was Christine's point earlier when she said a hero will come. My view is we're all heroes and heroines. Yeah. There won't be one person who will come and save us. We've got to save ourselves. Mm-hmm. And being informed and having conversations, even with people who don't agree or don't think that we're just mad because we think this is going on. They're going to change at some stage. Something's going to wake them up to what's happening. So we just need to keep with it and keep finding our people, don't we?
Absolutely. Yes. Maybe we can roll that last clip and then just, unless there are any other thoughts or comments or questions from anyone in the audience, maybe we can roll that clip, come back, and then say goodbye for this week. So, yeah.
It can't succeed, and it's too complex.
Yes.
And they are playing with the whole world. And all the peoples of the world, and all the nations, and all the systems, and all, as it's so complex.
Yes.
So it's easy to sit in your chamber and just think up these systems, and like playing a computer game. But it won't work.
It's impossible to run scenarios on 9 billion people around the world. I think the inherent imperfection of humans might be the Achilles heel. This will fail because you couldn't plan for every possibility of how people might react, and we are hard to manage. And maybe that will be what protects us or what saves us.
It can't succeed.
Yeah. Susan, you've receded into darkness. I think it must be sunset where you are.
Put the light on. Okay. No, hold on.
Anyway, I would love to hear what others thought of Jacob's final clip there.
because I love that, being in your chamber and going back to the point, to your Bond villain.
Yeah, it's too much to think that that it will succeed. And I think that if we all, those of us who are awake to this and who are reading these things and who recognize what Patricia's point earlier about, it's hard to fathom the evil. It can feel very, very wrought, very hard to deal with, but knowing that that we know what's going on and they know that we know what's going on, we can act out in that way, if knowing that, keeping in the back of our minds that we are humans and we are imbued with something divine, and we are not just animals. I mean, if you read the original work of technocracy as it was written 100 years ago, there's an entire section on conditioning, and it talks about how you condition animals through positive and negative reinforcement. And if anyone who's ever had a pet can kind of understand some of that psychology, they go into great depths about conditioning, because that's how they want to use training humans and playing on our own psychology. Again, you can take that and go, oh, this is horrible and I'm very scared by it. Or you can say, no, I refuse to fall into that trap. And again, if David Icke has written a book called The Trap, I mean, I think that's a perfect title. It is a trap, and we can avoid stepping in it. So I think we all just have to remember who we are and why we're here and what we can do. We do have control. We do have power over our own individual lives and choices. I'm not going to stop yet because we are getting some great interaction. So let me jump back and make sure that we're capturing all the great comments. So Christine Mose says, they want to take your soul, but they can't have it unless you agree to give it to them. Amen to that.
Amen to that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Someone by the name of George Carlin, too many moving parts and variables. I absolutely agree. I just think it's just too hard to keep all of those balls in the air at once. Christine Culls,
if we
go Susan. Yeah.
No, I was going to say too many moving parts, and if we are trying to be disruptive and not go along, then there's even more chances that it's going to go wrong and it's going to fail.
Yeah. Christine Cull says, technology is a double-edged sword. It can be used for good or nefarious purpose. Absolutely. And she says, thanking you all. Great work. So no, it's all to you. Thank you guys. We would be sitting here talking to each other if it weren't for all of you. And this is wonderful. Rachel Wild identifies that the system in China has been operating for years. They locked down Shanghai, the Chinese financial center, when the Evergrande group was about to collapse. People were throwing themselves out of their high-rise apartments in Shanghai due to the lockdowns. She adds, the people who wanted to perform a run on the bank couldn't buy tickets to get there. You have to understand that they will have full control over us with the tech.
Yeah, I mean, and people sometimes think that BRICS are going to be our savior, which is another subject entirely. But they've had that system in China. Russia is very digitally orientated, as you said. India is. It's a global thing. It's not just pockets. And this is the other thing that makes it very different from anything else that's ever happened in history. Mm-hmm. This is why it's great that we've got people here and you're sharing your comments and book suggestions and just reinforcing that we're not alone, that there are many of us and there's far more of us than there are of them, and that we can choose our future, not have somebody choose our future for us, and we can be empowered by that. And as you say, they're not having our souls.
Absolutely. Not unless we give it to them. And I doubt that there is anyone listening to this today who would willingly give up their soul. So we just thank everybody so much for joining us once again. Rachel Wild, one last comment. Tech can be completely weaponized in every way imaginable. Rachel says, I wrote a big piece about this in the International Times in May 2019. 5G, the big picture. The editor said it was the most important article they had ever published at that time. Wow, wonderful, Rachel. That's great.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll, if there's a link available, we can provide that when we send out the recap of this video discussion.
Yeah, it certainly can. It was really good. She's really on it. She has a good substack as well. We'll put the link into that. And she's very astute and writes really well.
Yeah, wonderful. So again, thanks to everyone for joining us. Thanks to everyone for the suggestions of books to read and to chat about. Susan, will you be back in the UK by this time next week?
Yes, I will. Yeah, going home in a couple of days' time.
Okay. And I will actually be over in your neck of the woods for the next couple of weeks. So next time I join you, I'll be in a new location as well. And we will probably move on to another piece of work. So we will discuss that amongst ourselves, and we'll be back next week with another book chat. In the meantime, we just wish everybody a wonderful week ahead. Stay human. Don't give your soul up to anyone. And thanks once again. Last comment, Christine Mose says, the BRICS countries all implemented COVID technocratic control. The new boss, same as the old boss. What's good about that, Christine, is that we already know the playbook, and they're not that creative to come up with brand new ways of working. It's always been the same. And so we can start to see familiar patterns and recognize them for what they are, I think.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, this is why we just need to keep talking to each other. And thank you, everybody, for your comments and being here. Really appreciated.
Safe travels, Susan. Enjoy the rest of your trip in Morocco.
Thank you. Thank you, Zahra. Good to be here today.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. And we will see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.